Have you ever turned off the lights, closed your eyes, and suddenly started living an entirely different life inside your head? Maybe you're replaying an argument that ended hours ago, except this time you finally say the perfect thing. Maybe you're imagining becoming successful, meeting someone new, or picturing a future where everything somehow works out. Or maybe your mind creates problems that don't even exist yet, forcing you to prepare for conversations that may never happen. If you've ever done this, you're far from alone. In fact, many people experience vivid imaginary scenarios just before falling asleep. Most assume it's simply overthinking. Others think they're wasting time or escaping reality. But psychology suggests there's often more going on beneath the surface. Your brain doesn't create these stories for no reason. While the details may be fictional, the emotions behind them are often very real. These nighttime scenarios can reflect the way your mind rehearses uncertainty, processes unresolved experiences, or explores possibilities that still matter to you. That's why two people can have the same habit for completely different reasons. One imagines tomorrow's presentation because they're preparing for a challenge. Another replays an old conversation because it never felt emotionally complete. Someone else invents an entirely different future because imagining possibility feels safer than facing uncertainty. The stories are different, but each may reveal something about what the mind is still trying to understand. And that's where things become fascinating. If you pay attention, you'll notice that most people who imagine fake scenarios before sleep don't do it randomly. Their minds tend to follow recognizable patterns. Some are constantly rewriting the past. Some are rehearsing the future. Some are searching for emotional closure. Others simply have imaginations that refuse to slow down when the world becomes quiet. Tonight, we're going to explore 5 of the most common psychological patterns behind this surprisingly common habit. As you listen, don't focus on the stories themselves. Instead, pay attention to the emotions that keep returning. Because the imaginary conversation may change every night, but the feeling behind it often stays exactly the same. And by the end of this video, you may understand not only why your mind creates these late-night scenarios, but what they could be trying to tell you about yourself. The first pattern is what psychologists sometimes call mental rehearsal. Have you ever noticed that many of your imaginary scenarios take place in the future? You picture tomorrow's meeting, a difficult conversation, a first date, or even a simple interaction at work. In your mind, you practice what you'll say, how the other person might respond, and what you should do next. At first, this may seem like pointless overthinking, but in many cases, your brain is trying to reduce uncertainty. Humans naturally dislike not knowing what will happen, so the mind begins simulating different possibilities before reality arrives. It's like running practice rounds for situations that haven't happened yet. The goal isn't to predict the future perfectly. The goal is to make the unknown feel a little less threatening. The problem is that the brain doesn't always know when to stop rehearsing. Instead of preparing once and moving on, it keeps creating new versions of the same situation, searching for a certainty that real life can never fully provide. That's why people who frequently imagine future scenarios aren't always pessimistic or anxious. Sometimes they're simply trying to feel prepared. The second pattern looks almost identical on the surface, but psychologically it's very different. Instead of imagining tomorrow, these people keep returning to yesterday. They replay conversations they wish had gone differently. They imagine finally saying what they couldn't say in the moment. They rewrite painful endings, hoping that somewhere inside a different version of the story they'll finally find relief. This isn't necessarily about refusing to let go. Often, it's the mind searching for emotional closure. Real life doesn't always provide satisfying endings. Sometimes people leave without apologizing. Sometimes misunderstandings are never resolved. Sometimes important words remain unspoken forever. The imagination quietly steps in to complete what reality left unfinished. The conversations may be fictional, but the emotions driving them are often completely genuine. And until those emotions are acknowledged, the mind may continue returning to the same story in different forms, hoping that this time it will finally make sense. The third pattern is often found in people with exceptionally active imaginations. For them, creating fake scenarios isn't always about solving problems or healing old wounds. It's simply how their minds naturally work. Give them a quiet room, and their imagination immediately begins building stories. They invent conversations, explore different futures, create fictional relationships, or imagine lives they've never lived. This doesn't necessarily mean they're unhappy with reality. In many cases, it reflects a mind that enjoys exploring possibilities. The same ability that creates bedtime scenarios can also fuel creativity, storytelling, innovation, and problem-solving. That's why many writers, artists, musicians, and highly creative thinkers describe having vivid inner worlds that become most active when everything around them grows quiet. The challenge comes when imagination never switches off. Instead of becoming a source of creativity, It becomes an endless stream of mental activity that makes it difficult to relax. The imagination itself isn't the problem. Learning when to let it rest is. The fourth pattern is driven by something much deeper than creativity. It's the search for emotional needs that haven't been fully met. If you pay attention to your imaginary scenarios, you may notice that certain feelings appear again and again. Perhaps someone finally understands you. Someone apologizes. Someone chooses you. Someone notices your effort, appreciates your kindness, or says the words you've always wanted to hear. On the surface, these stories may seem unrealistic, but psychologically they often reflect genuine emotional needs. The mind isn't necessarily trying to escape reality. It's exploring experiences that feel emotionally meaningful. We all carry needs for acceptance, connection, recognition, and belonging. When those needs remain unmet, imagination sometimes becomes a safe place where they can be explored without fear of rejection. That doesn't make the person weak or detached from reality. It simply reminds us that emotional needs don't disappear just because we ignore them. Sometimes they return quietly at night, disguised as fictional conversations that somehow feel more comforting than silence itself. The fifth and final pattern is the control seeker. These are the people whose minds constantly ask, what if? What if I fail? What if I embarrass myself? What if they reject me? What if I make the wrong decision? Night after night, their imagination creates different versions of the future, hoping that if they think through every possible outcome, nothing will catch them by surprise. It may feel like anxiety, but at its core, it's often an attempt to create certainty in a world that offers very little of it. The human brain naturally prefers predictable outcomes because uncertainty requires energy. Every unanswered question feels like an open loop the mind wants to close. So it keeps running simulations, believing that one more scenario, one more conversation, or one more solution will finally make everything feel safe. The irony is that certainty rarely comes from imagining more possibilities. It comes from accepting that some questions simply can't be answered before they happen. Once the mind learns that uncertainty isn't always a threat, it gradually stops working so hard to eliminate it. Looking at these 5 patterns together reveals something important. People who imagine fake scenarios before sleep are not all the same. One person is mentally preparing for tomorrow. Another is emotionally processing yesterday. Someone else has a naturally creative mind that never seems to switch off. Another is quietly exploring emotional needs that haven't been fulfilled, and someone else is simply trying to gain a sense of control over an uncertain future. The behavior looks identical from the outside, but the psychology underneath can be completely different. That's why asking, why do I imagine fake scenarios before sleep, is often less helpful than asking, what kind of scenarios do I imagine most often? The pattern matters more than the habit itself. The stories your mind creates are usually built around the same emotional themes, because those are the experiences your brain still considers unfinished. Once you begin noticing those themes, your imagination stops feeling random. Instead, it becomes a window into the concerns, hopes, fears, and values that quietly shape your inner world. The goal isn't to stop imagining altogether. Imagination is one of the greatest strengths of the human mind. It allows us to create, solve problems, plan ahead, and dream about better futures. The real goal is learning the difference between imagination that helps you grow and imagination that keeps you trapped in the same emotional loop. One expands your world, the other keeps you rehearsing it. So the next time you find yourself lying in bed, halfway through another imaginary conversation or another future that exists only inside your mind, don't be too quick to judge yourself. Instead of asking, why can't I stop thinking? Try asking a different question. What emotion keeps showing up in these stories? Because while the conversation may be fictional, the feeling behind it is almost always real. And sometimes understanding that feeling tells you far more about yourself than the story ever could. If this habit sounds familiar, let us know in the comments. Do you usually replay the past, rehearse the future, imagine better outcomes, or create entirely new worlds? Your answer may reveal which of these 5 patterns describes you best. And if you enjoyed exploring the hidden psychology behind everyday behaviors, be sure to subscribe for more videos uncovering the fascinating ways our minds work when no one else is watching.